call the workshop to order. This is a workshop to discuss the Restore Act multi-year implementation plan process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here, Sheree and myself are here today to the purpose to go over this workshop for the presentation, the discussions related to the Deepwater Horizon settlements and resulting funding opportunities and purposes and allocations of the Restore Act requirements. What this is basically we'll be presenting y'all our the work that's going to be needed, the presentations, that'll be the public information sessions that'll be going forward in order for us to create our multi-year implementation plan. So this is the process and that we'll be presenting to you, that we're proposing to move forward with and into the future. As I've said before, this is a starting point. 5 years from now, once we go through all this, and Sheree will go through everything, 3 or 5 years from now, the world could change as far as Restore is concerned and how all this works. But this is our starting point. So even though there's going to be a lot of discussion today and looking at stuff, that doesn't mean it's over a 15-year period, but that doesn't mean what happens today is the same thing that the end result will be in 15 years. It could be totally different. So this is just like everybody else. It's new. We're starting off. We have to have somewhere to step off, and here's where we're stepping off.
This takes us to the next step.
Takes us to the next step. So our workshop objectives today are we're going to discuss about the settlements and just the funding opportunities. We'll go over the Restore Act and our proposed objectives and criteria that we're going to use to rank the projects, and go over that with you guys and show you how we did that. And then there'll be decision points and next steps. And also, unlike some other meetings that we've had, workshops that we've had, we're going to be asking you at the in general business, there's a general business item to let's go ahead and solidify what our decisions are, make a motion to move forward so that staff can go ahead and hit the road tour, if you may, and collect this information. Okay. Next. All right. As you all know, we have 3 buckets of money that in one way, shape, or form will come into Wakulla County, and the aggregate of all 3 of those is about $90 million over the next 15 years. Each pot will be paid out, pot 1, 3, and the Gulf Triumph. Each one of those funds will come from the U.S. Treasury to either the state legislature for Gulf Triumph, the Gulf Consortium, and to Wakulla County in 1/15 over the next 15 years. So therefore, in each one of those, pot 1 is what we will be discussing today is primarily our discussion points for today. Pots 3, Gulf Consortium. As you know, I'm your designated person on that board. We'll be meeting in September of this month down at the policy conference, and we'll start over our first set of projects that the Gulf Consortium will be doing, and that'll probably wrap up, I would say, probably towards the end of the year, and we'll have our state implementation plan ready to go during the first part of next year, submit that, and funds maybe start rolling in here by summertime. As far as not in here, those funds will be spent by the consortium for projects here in the county. And Gulf Triumph, as I've told each one of y'all, Gulf Triumph is out there. It's controlled by the Triumph board, and Wakulla County is allocated. And Wakulla County, when I say that's just not the BOCC, that's Wakulla County as whole, is allocated right at $60 million. And so but as I've said, the rules are still being written there, so we can't jump too far out ahead of that. The rule, they've got to finalize the board. They can't even decide on an application form right now, so they're still in a serious state of flux. So anyway, as I said, we're here to talk about pot 1, and at this point in time,
You gonna drive?
I'll drive.
Okay. First of all, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be here today and to work with us on the timeline and the process. And so now that David's laid the groundwork and provided you with a high-level picture of the 3 separate buckets that we're going to be working with and the opportunities and the challenges of each, my role today is just to focus on Restore Act Pot 1, which are those funds that come direct to Wakulla County. And I know everyone is anxious to get right to project selection and know what projects we're going to have. But there is a process that we must go through where we document how we select projects and how we rank them. And that's the focus of my proposal today, is to lay a framework out for y'all to consider and hopefully accept at the end of this meeting so that we can start our public meetings and move forward. So the presentation is laid out into different sections so that each section builds and lays the groundwork for the next section. And at the end of the presentation, we will go back and we'll summarize the 4 decision points, and so that we know exactly what we need to do at the end of the day. Next. Wake up. So the Restore Act, it focuses on restoring the environment, protection of the environment, and economic development for economic recovery. And I should have put economic recovery, and I did not. I apologize. As David said earlier, the Restore Act funds are a result of the lawsuit with the U.S. Justice Department and BP. The fines that we received for the Restore Act were based on the Clean Water Act and the Restore Act of 2012. The Restore Act is very specific, where it identifies the recipients of these funds, what you can do for the funds, and how you will access those funds. They didn't leave very much to our discretion. Wakulla is one of 23 counties in Florida that's a recipient of these Restore Act funds as a direct component, and it goes from Escambia County all the way down to Monroe County. Wakulla County Board of County Commissioners is the official legal entity for the receipt of these funds, for the management, oversight, and direction of these funds. So anytime I do a grant, or I revise a grant, or I make a change to the MyApp, I have to come back to the board and present all of that for approval before I can submit it to U.S. Treasury. So I just want you to know there's not anything that I can do that you guys are not going to know about. So to access our funds, first of all, I think we've all heard, and I just like to reiterate this because I want to dispel all the myths that we've received some check and we're doing things that are not proper, because we all know we are being very, very conservative and proper with these funds. The funds go direct to the Treasury. The Treasury manages those funds. They treat it as a federal grant. We have to have a plan on how we're going to spend the money, which is what we call the MyApp, the multi-year implementation plan. Then we have to have grant agreements, and we have to manage those grant agreements, and then submit reimbursement for those funds for those projects that have been approved. Next slide. Earlier this year, you'll recall we canceled the contract with Dewberry Engineering. That contract was for $346,490, and they were going to develop the MyApp, but we learned that we could do it ourselves, and so we have amended the agreement with the Plain Assistance Agreement so that staff are now doing it, but we still have to follow those tasks. And I wanted to let you know that staff and the pre-approved award costs, which would pay Dewberry for some of their work, our grant is now $152,000 and some change, so we've actually saved the county about $200,000 that can now go towards projects. Although we reduced the budget, we still have to stick with the original scope of services, which includes the following tasks, and each one of those tasks have been cross-linked to activities that we're going to do to complete the MyApp. Okay, next. So MyApp, and I know that everybody hears that acronym and it's like, what is a MyApp? Well, a MyApp is required by the Restore Act and the U.S. Treasury rule. And that is our plan on how we're going to spend those funds. That is not the plan can be updated. We can modify it as time goes on. So whatever we adopt, the first one, just be assured that if we find out that we have funding from other sources or we want to change projects, there is flexibility there to revise your MyApp. But you have to have one approved to start your first grant for funds. And I'm not going to go over all the requirements, but what I've done is I did take those requirements and cross them back to the task in the statement of work for the planning assistance grant, so that I know that as I go through this process that I'm completing everything properly. And I just threw that in there so you can see one of the forms we have to fill out. That's exactly, you can't read it. It's really, really difficult. But to get this started, we have to have a starting point on, let's see, I can go to the next one. We have to do like a community needs assessment, and that may sound complex, but we've really taken it and reduced it down to a very manageable process where we're going to do phase one of the community needs assessment. We're going to start with an existing footprint, and by that what I mean is looking at a multitude of plans and documents that have been approved either at the state level or the local level, including those that I received from the City of Sopchoppy, Panacea Waterfronts, and St. Mark's and Panacea Waterfronts, as well as the school board. And those plans, the BMAP, swim plans, strategic plans by Great Northwest Florida, Opportunity Florida, I've been looking at those and finding the commonalities, not drilling down to projects or specific locations, but the high-level categories of certain needs. The gap analysis will be when we go out and we meet with the public, as well as here today and on November 20th at the next workshop. And we will find out what else needs to be included in the gap analysis, and then the three will take all together. And hopefully it's not going to be more than 10 or 12 pages. We're keeping it very succinct. So are there any questions on the gap analysis, the needs assessment? Okay, finally, we've developed a MyApp framework, and basically the framework is the table of contents of what will be included in the MyApp. So we're going to have an executive summary, which is kind of like, we had meetings, etc., and then an overview of the MyApp processes, which we're going to hopefully approve today. We'll talk about board engagement, workshops, public outreach and engagement. The public outreach is 3 public meetings, one in St. Mark's, Shell Point, and Panacea. The community needs assessment, project selection methodology, which I'm also going to present today for your consideration, and categories, activities, and projects. Post MyApp Outlook, we'll discuss where we're going to need to revise the plan as funding comes in or projects change. So now then, we are to the meat of the entire presentation, and that is the proposed eligibility requirements, objectives, and additional criteria, and the ranking. So the projects must meet one or more of the Restore Act eligible activities. And so the column on your far left, those are in the Restore Act, and every project has to meet one of those. The proposed objectives is for another layer of criteria so that we can just make sure that the project is going to fit one of the Restore Act activities, and it gives us another way to evaluate a project that may have one or more components. And the proposed extra criteria is a way that we can determine the feasibility of the project at a very high level and give us some assurance that projects selected can actually be implemented and produce results. And I'm not going to read over each one of those, but I'll give you a minute to look at it. So if you have any specific questions or ideas, then I would like to hear them. We're good? Thank you. And realize too that when we come back for the November workshop, those can be tweaked based on any input, or we can leave them like they are. And so what I did to show you what we're going to do with each project that's recommended, and this is a sample, it's generic, it's not about a location, but we'll do a project profile, and it'll just give information at a very high level, which shows the total points that scored using that scoring system just presented. The existing footprint is where I've identified that this need exists in multiple documents. It'll show the Restore Act criteria that we feel that this project meets, as well as the scoring for the objectives of the project and the additional criteria. And then we'll have a page that shows us what some project objectives are for that individual project. The milestones, very high-level milestones, and a sample of how we'll do criteria to evaluate success. Because with all of these projects, we are reporting to Treasury every quarter on how well we're doing. And so whatever our milestones and benchmarks are, if we're below that, we have to explain why we're below. And even if we're above, we have to explain why we're above.
Is that like a cost-benefit analysis, or are you just simply saying, here's what we said we'll do, and here's, we said we're going to do 25 of X, and we've done 25 of X, so we're good? Or are they looking for an actual return on investment?
ROI.
Turn on that.
They're expecting us to do the cost-benefit analysis, and so I would assume, like with a project like this, say for instance it was selected, we would take what we've already done as our benchmark for what we think a project like this would cost, so we can know that we're getting a good market cost. And I don't want to get off on a sidetrack, but when we do our procurement, there are requirements about current market and pricing that we'll have to deal with when we do procurement under the federal guidelines for procurement.
I do have one question maybe. So going back to the one where you gave us the point examples of Restore Act eligible activities.
This one or?
No, further back.
Here.
Yeah, that one. Just think that, so the left column is the most important. First, we know we got to hit one of those eligible activities. And in the middle, we got to hit an objective. And then the third column is kind of like extra. But I'm wondering, is the point system, is this the best way to do the point? Because the one that's the least important could be 10 points, just like the one that's the most important. And I mean, I don't know that I have an alternative, but I'm wondering if the left column, if we should maybe break that up so we're ranking just those items, You see what I'm saying? Because you could have something that's kind of further down that list, and then your third criteria could actually have a higher point than your first criteria.
If on the, and I see what you're saying, but if the Restore Act eligibility activities, let's take that first.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, based on just the emerging footprint that I'm seeing from the analysis of the different documents, those types of projects seem to be, or needs, I want to call them, seem to be more apparent. Like when you look at the local mitigation strategy and you look at the BMAP and swim plans and all of our local plans, even if you look at some of the EDC strategy, infrastructure needs are very important for business. But what you could do with your proposed objectives, a project could possibly have more than one objective.
Mm-hmm.
It could meet multiple objectives. So, but we can do it either way, whatever you're
And that's something that we could change later. And really this just struck me here, so I hadn't had a chance to wrap my brain around it. I'm just thinking that maybe we need to have some kind of heavy weighting on the first column, and then a reduced weighting on the second, and then a further reduced one on the third, so the third doesn't end up overpowering the first. We could have something that ranks down low on the first column and up high on the third column, and then that kind of takes over the priority when it's way down on the list as far as actually meeting the objectives.
Say we multiply all of them by 10, wouldn't the net effect still be the same? You made, instead of it being 10, make it 100 points for number one. Well, I don't know. I guess
If you did it percentage-wise, I mean, you could say that maybe column 1 is a percentage. I mean, so that you somehow have a percentage for each column with a ranking within that column.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious that the first column, you've got 10 points at the top and 1 point at the bottom, so we've kind of prioritized that to the most to the least important. But then I almost think we need a reduced weighting on the other two.
Well,
total.
And it may be also, now that you're thinking about it, we could have everything on the left-hand side be the same points.
Mm-hmm.
meaning if it's the 10 points. So yes, every one of those, as you see, some of them are 5, 7, whatever.
Mhm.
Just have all those as 10, because the problem's going to be is every project that we put in has got to it's got to fit somewhere on that left-hand, got to fit on that left-hand side.
So just a checklist item for the first column.
That's right, it's got to hit that. If it doesn't hit that one, it goes out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So then what the purpose is does it, the proposed objective, which one of these now does it hit? Because every project could hit, some of the projects can hit multiple ones of the proposed objectives. So that's where it can overpower it, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean? It's got to be at least in one on the left, and then you've got your extra criteria, which is primarily for stuff that's not in the primary objective. It's stuff that's like icing on the cake.
Right, you take, on the left column, you got 10 points. On the proposed objective, are we going to use, we have a
Well, you
budget.
could use 5 and 3. You know what I mean? Or
You could
5 or 2.
You could
that's
use
like that.
10,
Don't
5,
pick
and
two of
1.
them.
10,
We-
5, and 1.
We only picked one of those items on the middle to go with the one
Now,
on the left.
It could meet more than
It could be
one.
more. It could be
So it can
multiple.
be multiple.
That may be what to do is just go. We may change it. It probably won't change the rankings necessarily. It'll just be a way that probably makes a.
Well, if you'll look at the
this ranking and
sample-
everything was basically, you put it together.
We put it together. That's right.
If you look at the sample project, you'll see where it actually meets two Restore Act criteria, okay? And the reason why infrastructure is first, and I had this conversation with Treasury last week, if we select as the primary criteria anything that has to do with restoration, mitigation, those require best available science to back up what your outcomes and what you say the project will do. And in my conversation with the Treasury, they said that if we can put all the projects under infrastructure, they're fine with that. They don't care as long as our projects meet one of those objectives.
And I'm not sure about the blanket 10. I get the point, but I think, say if we only had a small pot of money, we're not very likely to spend a limited amount of money on improvements to state parks other than our own infrastructure projects. And so
That's why it ranks low.
I think we do need the ranking. I think we need to put more weight on the first column than the other two. I guess it doesn't matter.
But that would
Well,
bump up
and
the state
probably at the end of the
parks
day,
too, right?
everything's going to shake out.
No,
about
because
the
that would
same
still be
anyway.
a 1, but then have these weighted less than this.
But the scoring will come out the same, no matter how you add it up, and when you rank it, it's going to fall out the same.
Yeah, but we got you. That's something we'll work on. You're right.
And I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just when I'm looking at it, I just thinking that doesn't deserve equal weighting, you know?
Gotcha.
So this pot has what, 15 million, 16 million in it, how much?
12.
This pot has about 14 million, right at 14 million.
So we will pick the number of projects to
Yes.
have that money.
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
And all this is just saying, each one of these projects we're going to show you, does it fit that? And we go through there and yeah, it fits this one, no, it doesn't fit that
Over
one.
what time period, though? That's the key thing.
Over 15 years.
15 years. It's not like
That's what I'm saying. So you
can't
can
spend it
pick-
in a year.
You can pick 15 projects today, like I was saying earlier, and 3 years from now, we could have another 15 that we say, okay, scrap those. We're going to go with these.
Right.
They could take the money and spend it on something else.
Or take the money and spend it on.
Give everybody a tax cut for a year, and that money's gone.
You can have one project. I mean,
Yeah.
so that goes into the challenge that we have, that David was talking about earlier, is that we can't exceed, our project total can't exceed the total amount that we're supposed to get over those 15 years. And in any 1 year, project cost can't exceed the amount of money that we have in the bank at the Treasury.
That's a 1/15 of whatever.
So we have to either let,
15 million, you can use 1 million a year for all the
Exactly.
projects.
Exactly, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Or we can bank them for a couple of years.
You
if we
can
got-
bank them for a couple of years and spend it all in one shot, or whatever you want to do, but you can't bond against it, you can't borrow against it.
You don't have to go through 16 processes to make a change in what we decide.
No, no, we're gonna, there will be changes to this in the future, but we're gonna try to set it up so that it minimizes the time that it takes to make those changes, if you may. The better job we do now makes it easier in the future when we do understand there are gonna be changes. We can't predict what's gonna happen 15 years from now. We're good, but we ain't that good.
Now, you can have a project that uses a certain amount of money. Let's say it uses $1 million, and that's sort of the end of that project. So there's $14 million left for whatever else.
And if we said we were gonna use $1 million on a project and we only use 750,000, that other 250 goes back into our pot. It doesn't go away.
Right.
Just because we budgeted doesn't mean anything.
So if you have $1 million for a project, okay, and you plan that project, and you gotta have the $1 million, but all of a sudden a grant comes available, you can use this as matching funds for a grant and put that back in. So you're,
Well,
you'll be
whatever-
flexible ever.
That's right, you could say, okay, well, the project cost $1 million, we're gonna spend the Restore Act dollars. All of a sudden, another grant comes in that says, we'll put 500,000 to that, we can say, okay, we're gonna pull back on the Restore Act and put 500,000 of the Restore Act, $500,000 grant, we got our $1 million project.
Yeah,
And how that works. And that 500,000 go back into our bank.
All right, you've got the eligible activities. When do we start inputting our desires on eligible activities?
We'll present you guys as part of this. You'll see the same projects that y'all have seen before. They're in our AIP, as well as they're in the same projects that we presented to the Gulf Consortium for Pot 3. It's all related to all those projects. Okay?
So are you saying we don't put any projects in?
Yeah, you're gonna put projects in, you're got that opportunity to put project, well, we're gonna present you a suite of projects, then y'all can add projects to it. So, hey, if you wanna add a project to it, the public will be able to do the same thing. If they say, hey, we want to add fishing pier here in downtown Crawfordville. We'll write that down and does it meet the criteria or not. And that's what we'll bring back to you in
And
November.
those projects all come back to a vote of the board? Voted as an individual
Y'all,
vote?
not as an individual project, you'll vote on a suite of projects, however y'all want to, but we would recommend, here's the list, and y'all vote on the list of projects to move forward. But as I said, 3 years from now, that could very well change.
Yeah. I'm not sure, I would not rather take each project on a vote than an assortment of projects.
Well, that'll be for y'all to decide at that point in time.
okay, if we go down to the next couple of slides, what David was just talking about, we're using the, like David said, as an example, okay, and a possibility, we're going to go down a couple more slides.
Oop, back.
No, go down, right there. Okay, these are the projects that the board approved on March 6th for David to submit on behalf of Wakulla County to the Gulf Consortium for Pot 3 funds. And so what we've done is we wanted to let you see those projects, you know, because I know y'all have got a lot and you don't always remember everything that we presented. So we wanted to make sure that you saw what we had presented, and this is what the Gulf Consortium is working on now. They've vetted these projects, they fit the Gulf Consortium criteria, and most of these hopefully will make it into the state expenditure plan.
But as you can see in that slide, there's $90 million worth of projects. So that's the projects that you guys, I showed you in my in the spreadsheet that we had. We took those projects and we're saying we know we can't get all the funding from Pot 3, so therefore we want to throw them into Pot 1 as well as Gulf Triumph, and it boils down to, as you saw in the spreadsheet that I sent you, It boils down to a cash management flow, because you've got your 3 different types of funding plus your grant and your county funding. So what it gives us is once we have that suite of projects, we know where we can work for, we know what we need to go for in grants. The timing of all this has to work too, because you're only getting Restore Act Pot 1 dollars in a certain amount of time period over 15 years. Same thing with Gulf Consortium. In the Gulf Consortium, we could get $1 million this year and nothing next year, but then we may get another million or $500,000. So it's going to be a cash management or a management tool, and that's the reason we want to have a suite of projects to work from, so that we can, as this thing changes, come to you guys and say, okay, this project's here, we can get this grant, and we can put this bucket of funding over here to it. But that's the reason we want to, that's the reason I showed you the spreadsheet, so you can have some idea of the cash management that'll have to take on.
Where do the NERDA projects fall in this again?
NERDA projects don't have anything to do with this that we're presenting to you guys.
Those, we can ask, DEP administers the NERDA projects, right?
And I have input all of those into the DEP portal for NERDA funding.
So they may possibly pick up 1 or 2 or 3 of these
Exactly, and
that are on
that's the
there.
reason it's.
But we don't know that.
We don't know, everything's fluid right now.
The
so-
beach restoration, for example, would be a good one, because they're already funding the Shell
And
Point
that's
beach
in, that's in
restoration.
our project list, and what we did is we threw all the eligible projects that we thought were eligible based on the criteria that we went through with the Gulf Consortium, realized these have already been vetted. So we threw everything against the wall based on that vetting that we can do, and that's what you guys saw in that spreadsheet. Okay?
The tricky thing for me to grasp was the Triumph money is, we don't have any control over that.
Triumph
That's-
money, as I said,
That's the Wild West. Anybody can apply for that.
That's the
Don't have to
wild,
go through the
wild
board, don't have to do anything through us.
The law that passed has one sentence, and it says that the Board of County Commissioners of each one of the 8 counties shall review and submit projects to Triumph, and that we shall also meet with boards of elected officials to gather their projects, which means that once Triumph gets going, we'll probably, David or I, will do a presentation in Sopchoppy and a presentation to the school board and a presentation to St. Mark's. Once we know what Triumph is going to do, and we'll solicit their projects, pull everything together and bring it before the board in either a workshop or an agenda item.
Those are more economic development.
They are
what that money's for.
100% economic development.
I heard whoever was the chair of that board say that, if Crestview thinks they can use this to build sewer systems, they're wrong. This is for example, if somebody, Toyota was going to locate somewhere, this would help build a road or get sewer to a plant, or, and they, in the Triumph at least, they want a lot of matching money. They're not going to let that Triumph money be the only source of funding for a project, right?
Triumph
Right.
will also be the last funding that you get. So you have to put all of your funding up front, and then Triumph will come in at the end of a project and do the road paving or the sewer. So, so for instance, if I were Tractor Supply, and that's a pretty good example in Tractor Supply, I buy the land, I build a building, and so I've paid for all that. And so now then Triumph would come in, maybe pave the parking lot, put the
Build a
turn
turn
lane
lane.
in.
They would build a turn lane, put the sewer.
I don't see how they're going to
sewer
spend the
line
money.
to it. But other than that, they're not going to be buying buildings, they're not going to
Huh?
be buying
They'll
equipment.
spend it.
I mean, I don't
Stuff like
see,
that.
how much money is Wakulla County allocated?
60 million.
I just, if we could do it like we're doing the first part where we could put it on projects, fine, but
Well,
I don't see how we're going to get rid
No,
of 60 million.
the school, realize the
It's
school
not just
system
us,
is,
it's the industry too.
the school
No,
system is
TCC wants
involved
about
in this.
15 million of it.
But how's the school system?
The school system, these funds are available to the school system as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we've talked to Bobby about already is he wants to start, he's already started it, but he wants to expand greatly his program, a certificate program or trade schools. So that would take up if he build a building or rehab the bus garage, to convert that, I don't know how many millions that is, but, and he's got other programs, they will seed money for education, especially for trades, because as you know, we're lacking in tradesmen. And throughout northeast, really throughout northwest Florida, tradesmen, as one of the things we were at what was that, in Bluntstown, with Senator Munford and Senator Latvalla, that was one of the big things that all the counties from Escambia all the way here was like, we can't find tradesmen, welders. You know, we got industry coming into town, but we don't have any micro welders. You don't have any of that stuff. So that's one of the things that we wanted to be able to do is especially with us conjoining with, and one of our projects is Opportunity Park, the possibility of buying Opportunity Park, turning them into certified sites with Gulf Triumph dollars, then having the school there that the school, you know, has a micro welding or a welding program, has heating and air. Then we put the two together in the future. This is a futuristic thing, but then you'd have some type of funnel whenever a company came in and said, hey, what's the likelihood of me getting 10 to 15 welders a year, being able to employ them? Then we say, well, we've got a program already in the school, a welding program, so there is a source of that. So that's how we help build some type of industrial base here, albeit it'll always be small, but that's what we would plan for doing. We're using some of the Triumph dollars, as well as some FDOT PERC money to try to get them to go and finish 319 widening here as well.
I may be missing something, but you've got the estimated cost here down at 94 million.
Mm-hmm.
And we're only talking about 13 million. Somehow I'm missing that.
That is the cost of all of those projects altogether. Realizing,
I have to put those into a 13 million over 15
well,
years.
and that's the 13 million plus our pot one and the Gulf Triumph. That's about $90 million in funding.
Going on with this.
Yeah.
And then you got grant money we're going to put on top of that, as well as county funding from 1 cent sales tax and whatever that may be. So you add all that together, those projects, I think over the next 15 years, every one of them are doable. And it'll happen. Now what we've got to do is we've got to work our tails off to try to finesse and get that money and figure out every way we can to get every dime from the Gulf Triumph and hold back on our pot $1 as best we can, use our pot $3 for any land purchases as well as engineering and design. So that puts us ahead of the game, because right now we're behind the game as being a small county, because we can't go out there and spend, you know, every year $1 million in engineering studies like big counties can and have a plan ready to go. We've got to get the grant, let them pay for it and all that stuff. So this would help levels the field for us.
Gets us some shovel-ready projects.
Exactly.
This this Winco and St. Mark's, this 15 million, these are still suggested items, with the exception of, well, they are all suggested.
Yeah, all that stuff is all those have to be, every one of those is going to evolve. And some of them evolve and go forward, some of them evolve and fall off the plate. That's just the way it is, for whatever reason.
Now, we voted for you to put these in your perspective, whatever. But they're
Pot
not-
three.
Or in pot three.
Right.
Pot three.
Pot three. But we're going to be recommending the same ones in pot one,
So
because it meets the same criteria.
the state is doing a statewide implementation plan, just like we're doing our implementation
Right.
plan. The Gulf Consortium has to do the same thing from the 23 counties to put in a master plan, basically.
Exactly. Okay?
All right. So what we did for grins, and to show you a sample of how, using the ranking that we put together, knowing it's not perfect, but we wanted to show you if a sample of how these projects would rank using the proposed ranking. Next slide.
Is that it?
Hold on.
I like
Good
some-
workshop.
Okay.
And so that's why I said it's an example. It's not in stone, but I know that sometimes when you see ranking and you see projects, it's like you need to see it put together so you can see how it works. But just, and like I say, this was just a, going through, just saying, yes, it looks like it matches this, this is what a ranking would look like. And like I say, this is just so that you could see what those, if we took those SEP projects and we used the proposed ranking, how those SEP projects would lay out. Because at some point, the Gulf Consortium is going to have to do some ranking system as well. I'm not sure what it's going to look like.
These are the projects with y'all's blessing that we're going to be moving forward with when we hit the street with these, and these will be the projects we'll be using as example projects moving forward.
Now, but that, obviously, you have not had your meetings yet with the outlying communities, right? More projects may come out of that, correct?
Whole projects could come out of that, yeah.
I mean, we don't want people who are having a public input meeting and the decision's already been made.
Right. That's not, decisions hasn't been finalized. That's the reason we're going out to the public, is to get their projects. But this is something that we're anticipating, and we would suggest that there not be any sub-granting. We're not set up for sub-granting, nor anybody here in the county set up for sub-granting.
You're simply putting in the ones that the board authorized to submit to the consortium.
Exactly.
You're using those as an example. That doesn't mean there can't be something else. If Choppy has an idea for a central stormwater facility and they've got a grant or something, and that's not on the radar now, it might be in the radar.
It might be on the radar in the future, that's right.
And St. Mark's may have something.
That's right.
So the Winco St. Mark's, is that the only municipality item that's on here so
And
far?
that's really not even, that is taking the St. Mark's wastewater treatment plant offline.
Line and sending it north.
sending it up the
Which is the one that's right on the river, right, in the marsh.
Right. So I would imagine St. Mark's would have something, Sock Choppy may, we all know Panacea will. But like I say, they've got these projects, and what we want to make sure that, these are projects that have to do with infrastructure, have to do with resiliency, county, public access to waterways, etc. We're not recommending any sub-granting whatsoever, and we hope you guys agree with that as well.
Now, not to get too much off track, but the Triumph money, is that something that could be, DOT could come in and say, well, if you guys will apply for $3 or $4 million, we'll throw in $5 million
That's something that we're planning on.
to go ahead and push this up on the 5-year plan and go ahead and get it done.
We've got that in our plan, and in the spreadsheet I was mentioning. I don't think I showed it to you. But
Like I said, it's going to be hard to find a way to spend $60 million on economic
yeah, so
development
that's
that
one of the
meets
things.
a test that you show, because if you can't show that your idea is working, you got to give it back, right? So that's where the key. Anybody can come up with some wild hair idea. I'm going to make frozen squirrels or whatever and sell them, but if they come back and audit you and your plan ain't working, you got to get that money back. It's not like they give you the money and all right, Triumph money. That's right.
You could have a business that has no presence here whatsoever, and they could say, well, we want to relocate here.
Probably by default, they'd easily be able to show a return on investment for that. Because if Triumph spends $100,000 on a turn lane and they build a $4 million facility, that's easy to show a return on investment. What I'm trying to say is it's not easy money. I got this idea of what I want to do to make elevator parts or whatever. I mean, they're not going to just say, okay, here's $1 million, good luck.
Yeah.
We'll see you in a couple of years. That's not how it's going to work.
I see on the eligible infrastructure projects benefiting the economy.
Have all isolates here instead of.
There you go.
around the other place.
I don't see an infrastructure project up there unless you stretch it a little bit that benefits the economy.
You've got artificial reefs.
Got a marina.
You've got a marina. You've got sewer.
Boat ramp.
Boat ramp.
Now, I keep after you on
Yes, and
the rec part.
the rec park, that as of right this second, there's not and as I said, these things changes, there's nothing where we could slide that into any of this Restore Act dollars as of right now. What he's talking about is funding for, we get our land swap done with the National Forest, and building a rec park, a first-class rec park, and allowing the Restore Act to fund a portion of that, which is a good idea. But the problem is right now we don't have a slot to put it in. That we can, but as I said, that doesn't mean a year from now that'll change, and what we're going for is
It has to
especially,
fit one of the criteria, right?
it won't fit one of the criteria as of yet.
If one of the criteria was expanded recreational opportunities, that would fit right in there.
Well, it says infrastructure projects could benefit in the economy.
Mhm.
And if we get 10,000 people here a weekend, how can you not associate that with really?
Well, and you're right, Jerry, you're exactly right, Mr. Moore, and that's been one of our arguments. The problem that all we're telling you is, here's what we've seen and we've heard statewide, is that's a no-go as of right now. So nobody's turning those type projects in because we've been told, that ain't gonna happen. In fact, I believe Gates, one of his things is, don't think you're gonna be building a ballpark out of this.
Now, I see two or three of those things that I'm sure you hadn't even developed. You're just on the board.
Right. That's right. Now, all these projects, the sewer projects we're smart on the sewer projects, we're smart on the Bayside Marina, natural to wastewater treatment plant, we're very smart. But you leave the rest of those are numbers that we put in there based on the best available information that we've got today.
But any of the citizens' input items could replace or add to that.
Could add to that, replace those. Citizens can say, we don't want artificial reefs, and we would bring that back to you guys and say, the citizens said they didn't want artificial reefs, and if y'all say, well, we agree with them, then fine. If y'all say, no, we're still gonna have them, that's fine too. We'll
It's
vote
my
on them.
opinion, when we go forward and we have 40 items up there, 40 suggestions that are using all of our money plus whatever, that we basically vote each item individually. I'm not too much on voting the group.
That's gonna be up to you guys. That's a.
The advantage of voting the group, though, is if they have a list of things we want to get done, and there's a grant opportunity, they can pursue the grant, which can expand the money, as opposed to just having one thing that they can work on.
Well, I'm not saying we take the whole thing out. I'm saying if there's 40 projects the citizens want, and we got room for 30, then we need to probably take something out and add something in.
Well, they'll be ranked, right? They'll all be run through your ranking model,
Like that.
and it'll come, I guess what you're saying, Jerry, say there's 50 projects submitted, they rank, and we say, all right, we're gonna take the top 20. And you say, well, I don't like number 15, I wanna take it out. The board can vote to take that thing out, right?
That's right. If I don't like let's just say coastal sewer project,
Okay.
if I don't like that in the thing, I said, really, I want to vote on that project. I want to see if the 5 of us really agree
Yeah.
to that project.
If you get 2 other people to agree with you, then it's out.
Yeah.
Now, you and I, when we met, I had some other ideas about resiliency projects. I think I talked about,
And I called the Treasury, and they said yes, that those types of projects.
what were they? I forget.
Land purchases, the properties that frequently flood and have to be, FEMA has to pay out. That was an example of one.
And I think I gave you an example of an evacuation route for a road, for like Newport Road, for example, was paid for an evacuation route. I don't know how much is one, but. And then I think I mentioned to you Seminole Road in Sop Choppy. Remember, it used to wash out every time the river came up, then we paved it and we never had to fix it again.
Culverts.
Culverts, that's right. Bridges. No, we probably can't do a lot of bridges, but
Yeah.
those are other projects that would fit the resiliency category, right? Now, they may not fit the other categories.
Yeah, and we've tapped out on, other than purchasing properties that flood, we've tapped out on a lot of those projects, because remember, our last ones were, Buckhorn Creek, and, one down here, we had all the problems with the contractors on. That was our last
Mill.
portion of the FEMA.
That was FEMA money.
Well, still, it's the same idea.
But if there's a, just as another example, underneath Hilliardville Road, there's those 4 or 5 huge culverts that the Corps of Engineers put in. Remember, that was to alleviate flooding, that could be a resiliency thing. So there's still opportunities for other projects if there's a obvious drainage issue that can be resolved. You know, just as an example, we all know Harold Thurman's place floods in that.
That's Hilliardville is up this way.
Yes.
That's where we had FEMA actually helped us on when that blew out.
Name Spears, Hilliardville Road, yeah. But a project could be a regional stormwater pond to, you know, like Mr. Thurman's place floods, the store floods. That would be a resiliency issue, wouldn't it?
Well, that's what I'm saying. We've got, as you see, we've got a host of projects. We got, but, you know, realize as things come up, we can stick them where we need to, but we can, you know, we just got so many that we can deal with it.
I understand, but it could be run through the model and see where it ranks,
Sure,
and
sure.
if it's, whatever. At least we can show that we're, you know, we haven't said, these are projects, we don't want to listen to anybody else's ideas.
That's right. I think we need to say, okay, if it's 50 projects, that's fine. We'll run them out in the model, but we're going to bring to you guys as we see grant opportunities open up and other windows open up. We're going to say, okay, we may say, listen, we got a possibility of number 10. We can do number 10.
I think
We
you've
want to put it up to the top.
been in government long enough to realize that you got to have something in a plan before they're going to fund anything. So even if we put it in here and it doesn't rank high enough to get funded, somebody may come back 3 years later and say, we got this extra money, let's start looking at some of your projects that didn't get funded.
And that's what we've already got. You haven't seen our spreadsheet. It details every one of these out.
They all
And
keep,
it flows out the
think out of the box on projects. You know, resiliency is pretty
The s-
open too.
The school
we could-
board has the same
Road paving?
opportunity for this money that we do.
for the Gulf Triumph.
That's on out there.
Not this money.
That's right. Not what we're voting on or be talking about today.
If you move workforce development and job creation, just take it off of this and put it over on Gulf Triumph, then we could co-op with the school board, having them train the.
Well, and they're going to take off on that on their own, but they'll come through us. But we're encouraging them to do that.
We're
I
working
think
with
that's a good
them.
idea, and I'm assuming
We'll
you
have
guys
in charge
do
of
too.
that.
And these are the activities that were designed or implemented by the Treasury. That's part of the federal bill, that's the criteria we have to meet.
Going back to what, Randy, what you were saying about a host of projects that the board had approved, and the community needs assessment, we could have an appendices that would be a list of the projects, and one part of it could be those selected for the MyApp, and then the other projects could be projects approved by the board as priority for other funding opportunities. So that way you would have a document that if somebody said, has the board approved this, I could go, yes, they did.
Well, ask people when you're out in the community, you know, be thinking about things that have repetitive damage that keep having to get fixed, be it a road, a bridge, or a low-lying spot. And let's just get as many suggestions as we possibly can.
Once the funding starts on a project, that project is locked in, pretty much.
Once we start, well, because all this is a reimbursement.
We got
By the time we get a check, it's
If you take the trailhead at Oaks property, we've already done that. So that can basically just come out of it.
well, the Oaks property, this is improving. In fact, you guys probably next, probably October, we'll have the deed from DOT.
Hopefully.
Yeah, on the Oaks property, so we'll own that in about another month. So yes.
Well, it'll just
that
be a
one-
parking lot with a knockdown
Well,
building.
we're also working out a lease with them for a parking lot to use existing asphalt that's actually on the right of way, a lease agreement for that so that we can stripe it so people can come down and use it to park and go on the bike trail. But then we're taking ownership of the rest of the land, and then we'll be applying for grants as well as using some of the Restore Act Pot $3 to do design work for an official trailhead.
Panacea sewer retrofits, I mean, I don't know if we've
al-
tried
just-
for
we
years.
just finished that through FEMA. We just finished that.
Well, I'm talking about upgrading all the getting rid of all the grinder pumps that tear up constantly.
Well, that'll be part of our stormwater program there, and we've gotten rid of a bunch of that already. Other than we got a few left out there, but not many.
Of grinder pumps? The old 5-horse?
We've been in a replacement program for
And
probably
you're getting rid of the grinder pumps, putting non-clog pumps in?
on-clogs, we put a whole bunch of them in, but we still got more to go. We're also converting everything over to three-phase.
You've been around for the hurricanes when the lift stations have overflown and sewers ran out to the refuge. You remember the mess that was? And, you know, preventing things like that from happening is certainly resiliency.
Yeah, but you're right, we've got some more of those to do, but we're converted. What we're doing is trying to convert them, the lift stations to three-phase, because all those are single-phase right now.
Right.
They're burning our butt.
Just as an example, almost the eligible activities here, almost all of them refer to fishing, wildlife, whatever. Well, several of them do, seafood, fishing, and whatever. I do agree basically with your septic systems, cleaning up this whatever. But in my opinion, that artificial reefs should move right up under that category. I think that should be a very high priority after we take care of the sewer systems, because nothing is more beneficial to our coast than fisheries.
Well, yeah, and I wish I had the what you got to look at, and you're right. But I'll go back to the spreadsheet I gave you, I showed you guys. You got to look at this thing over a 15-year period and payments coming in, and as grants come in, like our Amendment $1 on our sewer. So this year we may spend $1 million in design and implementation of a septic and sewer, but we can't spend any more money on it until the next phase, which is skips a year. So that's when we're going to come back to you guys and say, okay, we've got a funding opportunity, artificial reefs. FWC said they'll give us $100,000 for artificial reefs. Artificial reefs are number, 9 on the list. Here, we've already got it planned out. I've already got dollars assigned to artificial reefs, $125,000 per year for the next, I don't know, 8 years, that we could put in and say, okay, now we're ready to match that funding up with that grant opportunity and go forward. And
I guess we're talking about the same thing. I just want to see artificial reefs.
Just where my thing is, the ranking is good, but at the end of the day, we're going to play from top to bottom as far as trying to get funding. So no matter, when y'all get done with the ranking, to us, we're going to look at this as a whole list of projects, and as funding comes available, we may take the last one on the list, and it may be the first one. We say, hey, we got an opportunity here, let's go.
It'd be easier to justify the number 1 than the number 15.
List
You have to
right.
show,
That's right.
this is why we're overriding the list.
Exactly.
This is the benefit.
Exactly.
List is life. Like Schindler said.
Okay?
Okay, so anyway, well, this,
Ralph, if you have a
Exactly what we
problem with
wanted,
the
healthy
ranking system,
discussion.
This is where to look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, to see how they rank and
I think
see if
you're right.
if the projects you think are important are high or low.
Right.
Proofing the model.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. And it might can be fixed by that left category, just doubling all those numbers, or tripling the numbers and double the second column and leave the third column at face value.
Does it need to be?
Yeah, you could put a multiplier.
Yeah.
on it, that's
Does
right.
the ranking
Yeah.
that came out of the model make sense, though? Is there something in there that's
That's
skewed,
I mean, I don't know that there is,
look at this
And that's one of the
ranking and
things,
see
that's
if it
one of the
needs
ways
to-
we tested it as well, Randy, is we looked at it and said, from a logical standpoint, based on eligibility and where everything is, does it make sense? The projects make sense, and they seem to.
yeah, you're right. But
Everybody's got their pet peeve project, but in general, it
As
kind of
long as
ranks.
you're working that whole list holistically,
Right,
and whatever you can get done, I'm fine with that, if we take that approach.
yeah.
And we don't work somebody's pet harder because it's so-and-so, but.
We
it all
plan
gets
on
worked
working every
equally.
one of them.
Right.
Well, and like,
to me, this list is just to tell them which ones to look for and look
Right.
for grants.
Exactly.
Okay, that's,
Exactly.
we're not gonna get money like this for matching funds in the future. It's gonna have to come out of our ad valorem taxes. So if we got this kind of money, we need to be looking for the matching funds for grants.
yeah. Well, and what he's pointing out, I'm guessing if we had $1 million and David said, okay, you got 2 choices. You can buy Bayside Marina or you can do coastal sewer in all those coastal communities. I'm guessing we'd probably say coastal sewer.
Right.
I know I would,
I would.
but that's way down the list.
But that's,
You
and
know?
that's the decision y'all let us make at that time. Y'all will come back and say, all right, guys, we got $1 million, we can do these two things, which one you want to do?
And
that's what
we'll
can
come
do.
back with a recommendation
Right.
as to here's what,
Right.
because realize this is all about, it's a cash matrix.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's, you gotta have the big, you gotta look at the big picture. And that's the reason we've developed this spreadsheet so that we can implement, we can put that in there and say, now, how does that affect the cash? Because if we use money out of here today, move this project to here, how does this affect this project that we got amendment $1 we know coming next year? See what I'm saying?
Another
So
tricky,
we gotta look at all that.
another tricky thing for them is gonna be, let's say they got whatever it is, by Bayside Marina, say it's 3 million, I don't know what it is. They say we're gonna do $1 million in this pot, $1 million Gulf Consortium, and we'll do $1 million, what's the other one? Gulf Triumph.
Right.
And the Triumph says, well, I'll do it if they'll do it. And then, you know, you don't know if they're gonna do it or not, and the consortium might say, well, I'll only do it if you do it.
That's right.
So there's no plan. There's no way to make a logical, methodical plan, because you don't know what any of these three groups is gonna
It's
do. Now, we do know what
Right.
we're gonna do, but in order to really leverage this money, we need to use some of the other two pots.
Exactly.
And we have no idea what they're gonna do.
That's what
None.
David's been advocating, so.
If you take Bayside Marina, and we look at the benefits of it, and we decide that the money can be better used, then we can go somewhere else with the money, pull it out.
You go somewhere else with the money, that's right. But, you know, that's where there'll be decision points whenever each one of these come up, and what we'll do is we'll go through whenever it say,
See how it resorts to this.
that we got available, we can go ahead and move on Bayside Marina. We'll come to y'all and say, here's what the effect is, here's what the costs are, and here's how we can afford it, here's how we can't afford it, here's what's got the falls.
And here's why we don't need it.
That's right, whatever.
Triumph or Gulf Consortium could come to Wakulla County Jail and say, we wanna give you $1 million for artificial reefs, but you need to match it $225,000. It's in our plan. There you go. So it could be used as match.
I think of like a ×3, ×2.
Exactly.
One, and I think that would probably, may do that and resort that and see how it ranks
Oh, yeah,
down.
multiplier would be probably big.
Try it and see how the list ranks out. If it puts one of the lower projects.
And one of our logic tests was, is how these projects ranked out and making sure it kind of made sense based upon the direction that that the board has went on and all that
I
stuff.
think we can smooth that a little bit better. I think.
I mean, everybody's got a different opinion, and we tried to hit the middle of the road here.
Right. I mean, your numbers,
Yeah.
maybe use a multiplier, it would probably make.
You could do that.
Yeah.
The board can even set priorities within that criteria. You could say that you've got 2 priorities, maybe infrastructure for 1, and you could use a multiplier of 0.25 for your priorities. You don't even have to, you could say, we're not going to fund anything in these criterias. All of our projects are going to be here.
Right.
So you can set priorities within the restore criteria. And as an example, and I'm not making a suggestion, this is just an example, the board could say, we're not going to do land purchases with this money. And so that would, anything that required a land purchase would be taken out. And that's just an example of how the board can make some decisions on what projects are important.
Well, one thing I think we're gonna decide on is we're not gonna have any sub-grantees. So that's one major criteria, because we'll be on the hook for,
That'd be a disaster.
so we're already probably gonna be taking that step, which winnows down the possible projects.
Bayside would go to 125, coastal stormwater would go to 77, that's doing it ×3, ×2. It worked out the same.
That's what I'm saying, it's probably all gonna work out. I could do it on the
It
spreadsheet,
comes back to us.
but I can't tie into our system here.
And I'm fine,
Or we change it.
as long as it's gonna come back to us, we get to,
Yeah,
as a board, say,
yeah.
And we can, if we wanna add extra criteria, we can. Sheree just come up with hers. Like, I would say one could be, does it mitigate repeated damage, you know? I could say, I want that to be a extra criteria, and I wanted to have 10 points.
Mhm.
And if we decide that that's the extra criteria we like, Chuck could say if it has the color blue in it somewhere, I want to give it an extra 5 points. If we vote to do that, then, I mean, sure, we just come up with these on our own. I mean,
I did it based on a review of like the different documents, and just because, I mean, I've done this for a very long time, and so I had a good, an idea that, what are very simple criteria that could show that it would be feasible to implement, because that's another thing. We have to make sure that this project that we select, we can even do it within that budget and within a specific time frame.
well, something, just thinking out loud, something, if the criteria was it mitigates repeated damage or pollution, that fits right into the sewer, because those septic tanks are going to pollute the groundwater from as long as they're there, right? And if we fix something that gets repetitively damaged and we have to keep fixing it, same thing, it saves money over the long run. That'd be easy to show return on investment.
Mhm. And especially if FEMA's done multiple payouts, but the minute we say, like say for instance, if we say that FEMA has paid out for repairs, then we're going to have to, have that documentation.
And I don't think we ought to get into the business of buying houses that have been flooded, but if we have infrastructure that's repetitively damaged,
Yes.
then if we can prevent that, so I'm officially submitting that as a proposed extra criteria.
Okay?
And it may make sense to buy a house somewhere if we need a retention pond in that area or something.
Wakulla Gardens, and you get a house that's repetitively flooded, and we need to put a stormwater pond there.
Okay.
All right, decision points. If you will, go to the next slide. Okay, what I'm going to do next one is, okay, this is the plan of action. So this will be the first decision point on the timeline that we're looking at. So today is the kickoff to get your input and your direction on where you want us to go with everything. Then in September, we're going to do our public meetings, and basically what we're going to do, we're going to take the same presentation, but instead of it being proposed, we're going to show this is what we came away from this workshop with, and this is what we want citizens to look at. So they're going to basically see the same presentation, just modified to fit their public meeting.
But they can propose, are you going to tell them that this is your time to?
What we were thinking about doing, and David and I'd like to introduce Natalie Knowles, who is working with me now, so she's wonderful. I'm very thankful to have her. What we were talking about doing is taking the sheet where we have all the criteria on it and ask the citizens to look at it to see if they have any changes, and if they do, they could make their changes and submit it to us at the end of the night so we could have it. If they don't turn anything in, then we're going to take that they agree with it. We could do the same thing with the projects that come out of here today, just examples of the types of projects, and ask citizens to look at that, and then they could add projects.
That meet that criteria, because we don't want somebody submitting a oyster drying plan or something like that.
Well, see, what we'll have to, this is what we'll have to do as staff. At that meeting, we probably won't be able to know for certain, or we wouldn't want to speak at that time in a public meeting that it does or doesn't. We'll just take the idea and maybe get that person's name and number so we can find, get somewhat your objectives. And then Natalie and I would have to take the model for the ranking and apply it and get some additional information, and then we would bring that back to everybody at the November 20th board meeting.
If you take the projects that you have outlined to the general public, I think it's going to be quite confusing, because the sewer projects are pretty clear, and I think everybody's idea up here is they're primary. But when you go down below those projects, as to Spring Creek and Skipper Bay and whatever, it's going to get very confusing, because they're going to wonder if you've already negotiated that, where are you in that process. The owners of those properties are going to say, they never talked to me about that at all, whatever. It would be my suggestion, if I were doing it, I would put in those sewer projects and that kind of thing as sort of
Things
cut in
that we're
stone.
certain of.
And then I would put 50 other items and let them rank the 50 other items that they would like to see. And then you can take and just pull those items out. If you've got, now I say 50, I'm just giving you an example, but you give people, you know what can possibly go in.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that and you're right, but our thought is, number one is, these are a type of projects that we have embedded that meet the criteria of the Restore Act. And only reason we were saying is to say, this is why this type of project, meaning a Spring Creek Lands, it's pulling it out of development, it's possibility, and it's, adding to the economy here, pulling lands out of development, it's protecting resources. So
I think what Jerry's saying is-
and I understand what he's saying, it's just
Show-
it was going to be the example
I
as well.
totally agree with
Are
that.
you showing our hand, I think is what he's saying. If I own
Well-
Spring Creek Marina and I said, this is the county's number 4 project, well, start counting dollars,
You're not gonna pay more than appraised value anyway.
We're
Well,
not going to pay more than the price, that's right, so that's what I mean, and they don't know which Spring Creek lands we're talking about.
You have, you'd be surprised,
I know.
but you have this category. You know the projects that could possibly go into the thing. So list those projects.
Well, that's what that is.
Otherwise, I'll be talking about that I need to add a basketball court on the side of the church over here.
Maybe we could show some examples of the type of projects that are suitable, and then maybe examples of types of projects that are not suitable, so that we can show them
Right.
both.
Right.
anything private enterprise is not suitable.
That's right, no private enterprise, we're not going to pay for
No,
McDonald's.
no swimming pools.
If it were me,
We're not going to build McDonald's.
I would list,
California.
30 projects that will fit into the Restore Act. You go to the citizens and say, pick, give these points, 1 through 30 as to how they arrive and how you figure them to be. And then add a project that you may like over on the other side. Because they're probably going to be adding a basketball court to the church.
Well, that's what we got to try to explain away, that's not the.
But,
But if they do, we'll take that in, but then when it comes back to you
Well,
guys, we'll say, here's all the stuff, but of all these, here's the qualifying projects based on this.
But
Here's these qualifying.
also you could say, well, the basketball court can't pay for it with this, but you're welcome to go to Triumph.
Exactly.
And see if they'll pay for it for you.
Exactly, and that's the whole thing. We'll present every project that's mentioned at any of this stuff, we'll bring back to you guys, but then we'll say, but of these, here's the ones that fit the criteria, and here's our project list.
Because that's what we'll, like I say, Natalie and I will have to sit down and probably get contact information, get more specifics, so that we can do a project profile on it and a ranking. And remember, that will be an initial project profile, an initial ranking. It's not the final.
I would let them rank the projects that you put on the board, because you can't go outside of those projects by another 10, most likely, because we're talking about fisheries and infrastructure and sewers, so it's going to be hard to spread another 10 projects out below those. But I'd like to see how they rank those projects after the sewer.
Okay. And
But
without,
sure, it's
without using the scoring system. Just what they think is good projects.
Yeah.
Well, one place that I see that we may invite additional projects to come in, with the exception of the Bayside Marina, every one of these is solely an infrastructure project, which obviously that's off our infrastructure plan, so that makes sense. I'm not saying, I know that's a problem we need to solve, but there's other things that may be priorities to other people as we get those inputs that they say, well, I'm more concerned with economic development or production or consumption of seafood, and there may be other projects that come about, because this is almost solely an infrastructure plan. Which, that's our ultimate need that we're responsible for.
But isn't, these two pots of money are for these type of projects, and Triumph
Economic.
That's for the economics. We got 63 million for the economics.
Yeah.
These are the projects to build infrastructure so we can
Yeah.
improve our coast and improve our quality of life. And this is our chance to do it.
Oh, I agree. I don't disagree with that.
Well, and you're right, but that was the whole intent that, that the board is focused and everybody else, it initially was going to be economic, and then as everything's came about, it boils down to infrastructure for these two pots, and then after that, that's where the Gulf Triumph came in for your economic.
Well, and like Randy's talking about the flood stuff, that could easily be coastal flood protection and infrastructure.
That's right.
That can tie together.
Okay, so are we ready? Okay. So anyway, that's the proposed schedule, and you can see it's pretty compressed through December. A lot of work for us to get done, but we would come back in November 20th and present what we found out from the workshops, from the public meetings, and present it to you with a draft MyApp without projects, and then the draft community needs assessment, and then we would get your direction on what where you wanted to go from there, and then we would come back in, I suppose, January 8th with an agenda item where we would present the draft MyApp with the projects based on your input to show you what it would look like, and then even then, if you wanted to tweak it, you can tweak it because it's not final.
If you give the citizens this point system that we've got here, which we have much difficulty figuring out ourselves, you will have absolutely total confusion. If you just ask them what projects they would like, and then you can fit those into these
Into the
point
project.
systems.
We can,
I think you're underestimating the people that are going to comment, because the people going to comment are going to see that point system and recognize how we're seeing the value. Now, if they disagree with the point system, fine, I don't hear their disagreements, but this is how we're seeing the value and why their things are coming out.
Well, it's very difficult for me to work through the point system. Maybe I'm not quite so smart as the citizens.
Well,
I'm not saying.
it doesn't, the projects are going to be, at the end of the day, what we're going to be focusing them on is does the project meet one of these or two of these, and is the project infrastructure? If they know it's not that, well, is it land acquisition, public use? Well, no, it's not that. Is it resiliency, natural and man-made events, which goes toward renting? No, it's not that. So that's what I mean. We'll walk through that with the citizens so that they'll say, all of a sudden they'll say, yeah, it is potential to leverage and match other grants. Yeah, okay, I signed at 5 points. So we'll just have to walk through it that way as each
Is
one.
the proposed objective column here, is that written in the law or just the Restore Act eligible activities?
Proposed objective?
those are some categories that I came up with that were a little bit
Not
narrower.
extra criteria, but proposed objective. Is that in the law or only is eligible activities in
On
the
the
law?
left-hand side is the law.
Left-hand side is the law. Proposed objective is from us?
Basically, those objectives are those are going to be the categories that you'll see in the needs assessment, and I was just trying to marry it all up so I could cross-connect everything.
Because I was thinking of poor Jerry over there. One of them is increase and enhance recreational opportunities.
That can be a proposed objective.
It is in the presentation, but it's not in the Restore Act eligible activities.
But it would fit under recreation and infrastructure projects, like boat ramps, kayak canoe ramps.
Yeah.
To the coast, I mean,
It's at the coast, and that's the whole point. is
What color garden
It's
is
not
on
a,
the
I mean,
it's not a, and that's the problem that you get, is they talk about
it's-
recreation, but it's
it's
at the
up at
coast.
the coast.
Sewer ends up there.
So
That's
you
right.
can't just
Yeah.
Well, it's, the money's not,
use logic.
the money's meant for countywide, right?
Not this.
Yes and no. Gulf Triumph, yes.
You got
Countywide. This pot 1 and pot 3, they have to have an effect on the coast. Okay, that's the reason you've got sewer, that's the reason all your land acquisition projects are right around the coast. It all has to have an effect on the coast, and that's where it doesn't, that's where you can't get to a ballpark up in the, with this. Now, Gulf Tryout, that's where we're gonna try the ballpark.
Now, if we had a ballpark that was built in the wetlands and we wanted to restore the wetlands,
You had to bring that up.
then we could tie that together. Right?
That's right.
We're not gonna co-op any of this money with any private or public.
That's not the intent, that's right.
Now, I see here promotion of tourism in the Gulf Coast region, including recreational fishing. You could tie in basically billboards on the interstate and all the roadways. That's promotion of tourism on the Gulf Coast. You could because that's marketing. So, actually, promotion is marketing.
You couldn't use it for operational though, right? But
The focus of, if you look at the
I
part
don't-
one
I
and
don't-
part three, the
It would
focus
buy
of these
things
has
like
to be on
print
environmental
ads,
restoration and protection.
radio
That's what they're
banners
on.
on news stations.
I thought you didn't like billboards,
It
Jerry.
basically says promotion of tourism in the Gulf Coast region. Promotion of tourism, that's marketing.
Well, I'm not sure they're really interested in billboards for this.
They're already, I'm not saying billboards will come.
Another type project I had talked about was like Willie Park, for example. Every time we get a high tide, it floods it, and it floods the playground equipment out there. And one thing I'd suggested is moving Willie Park away from the ocean front. A new Panacea Park. That was something along the lines of resiliency that would enhance recreation. That may be a project that somebody may suggest.
You'll have to fight Cherie Posey Miller over that.
I'm just saying, repetitive damage stuff.
Well, you could see hardening it such that it's can withstand the floods,
Yeah.
but I don't think you want to move it away from the coast, because what's the attraction
Whatever,
of the
you
place?
make it
It's gotta be on the coast.
reinforce the pier, or maybe you put the playground equipment somewhere else and leave the, I'm not suggesting anything.
And guys, we don't have to project the future. As I said, we can add to this later. We don't have to, today, we don't have to decide what we're gonna be doing 15 years from now. So, we don't need to kill ourselves and
15
make sure we
years
get every damn thing.
15 years will definitely be different than today.
My point was that this isn't set in stone. If
That's right.
somebody has something they think would be a good idea, maybe they can put it in there.
And
Or if a citizen has something that's a good idea.
we'll throw everything that we can at it, but at the end of the day, we're gonna have to revisit this on a regular basis.
And the other thing we have to do, remember, is we have to phase in each project based on the amount of money. So right now in the bank, basically at U.S. Treasury, we have like $3 million and some change. So the first round of projects, say if we put in the My App today, the first round of projects could not exceed $3 million. So the next project would have to wait until we got the next deposit of funds. So every project that I put in the My App, at the end of the day, it's gonna focus around the money. So if you have 10 top and that's gonna be another way that's gonna weed projects down, is because that's what we're gonna have to do once we get all the projects. That'll be David and Natalie and I sitting down and projecting out, okay, so this project, it requires $5 million. So that means we're gonna have to phase it out, and so it's gonna eat up all the money in year one, so you can't fund another project. And so that's another thing you're gonna have to take into consideration, based on the amount of money, is what do you wanna do? So how far out do you wanna space projects? Because we only have so much money per year.
One of the things that I've never been a proponent of is basically the bike trail, because so few people use it. But all of a sudden, I've changed my entire outlook, because today, one of the big things is electric bicycles. Everybody's getting into the electrical bicycle. Yamaha, Bosch, Suzuki, Panasonic, everybody's doing it. Electric bicycles today are getting 20 miles with no assist and 40 miles with just a little bit of assist. Coming down the road with the trails that we've got, you're going to see a huge number of people on these trails, because they don't have to put out a whole lot of energy and they can enjoy the trails. But that's just something that you wouldn't see today, that most likely in 5 years is gonna be pretty much, it's gonna be something that's there.
I want a Vespa.
The next thing I got one, I'll sell it.
Do you have a Vespa?
No, I've got a Helix.
Oh, okay.
It's a
On
Cadillac
them
Vespa.
bicycle taxis where somebody else pedals you and you sit in the back,
Yeah,
just ride the trail.
but I tell you, it's coming, and it's coming really fast.
Yeah.
You just type in
There's
electric.
a lot of people using the one trail that
You
we have,
type
there's
in-
a lot of people on
A
it.
lot of people on the St. Mark's Trail.
Yeah.
You
I
type
was
in
surprised
electric-
at how many people are on it, and that's a one-shot trail. Once you
Yeah.
make the connections,
Yeah, it's gonna
you're gonna
be,
see a lot different.
There's a lot of people on the OBT trail when it's not blazing hot.
Any rickshaws out there? That's what it's called, right, Heather?
Or pedicab.
Is that where you, when you sit in the back and the guys in the
Rickshaw,
front
yeah.
pedaling? Yeah.
it's gonna be.
I think they call them pedicabs.
Huh?
They call them pedicabs now?
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Because-
I hope y'all have a better turnout at your
I-
workshops than we did here today. I'm glad we have the one citizen we have, but if you don't do better than this, you're not gonna get a lot of inputs.
Kelsey's not a citizen.
That was
Kelsey
Miss
doesn't
Becky
count.
is.
She's like,
Do you live here in Wakulla
she's one of
County now?
us.
You live in?
We don't have any say here then.
Tourist, she's a tourist.
You know who she is?
Okay.
All right, so anyway, this is the proposed schedule. We can change it if we find out we need to, and we'll come back. So let's go back to the next slide.
So,
Okay, so the decision points today, accept or amend the proposed framework, process, and schedule, accept or amend the proposed objectives, activities, and additional selection criteria, accept or amend the proposed ranking system, and use the Restore Act Wakulla Pot 1 funding for county projects exclusively, including those approved by the board on March 6, 2017 for the Gulf Consortium Pot 3, and do not subgrant any Restore Act funds. Now then, the agenda item that's going to follow on the board meeting has those exact decision points in it, with the actions for the board to either accept the decision points or not accept them. So your suggestions for adding additional criteria would be made at tonight's board meeting. So you would just amend the decision points, and then that's where you would say add an additional criteria to include prevention of repetitive damage from wind or water damages.
Or pollution is my main thing.
Mhm.
The committee who approves these, who are they and who is
Sitting right here.
who is our representative?
come out for pot one,
Yes.
y'all are the committee.
Pardon?
Y'all approve these.
Yeah, but it still goes up to somebody else for the final approval.
For pot one, it'd be U.S. Treasury approves the projects, the final.
If it meets the
Once we submit
criteria.
them, but that's it. You're the main,
We're the bottom line,
You're
as
the
long as
bottom
it
line.
meets the
Well,
criteria.
we can't submit a project that doesn't meet the criteria.
Right,
Treasury will definitely kick it back.
that's right.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's pretty good.
So tonight at the meeting is the time for me to introduce, do I need to say how many points it has to have?
The bottom line
If you want
There's other two
to, or you
pots.
can direct staff
There's
to add it.
other people
I-
that have their projects.
You can-
Don't put one. All right.
It's, you can just say it's a priority
Put
and we will.
.5 or something on it, and then might as well not even have it in there.
We might not agree.
And then,
Huh?
We might not
and
agree.
then,
Yeah, that's true, y'all can vote against it. It'll be an all up or down vote. So if anybody else has any criteria they want to add, speak now, forever hold your peace. I mean, we can come back, we're, the proposed activities are, that's the projects, right? But we can always change that.
right,
That's
because we're
right.
going to
Okay.
come back, we're
This
going
is
to do
just
public.
proposed for now.
This is get us
November.
started. This is, pushes us off the dock.
We got our floaties on, we got.
Everybody fine with this?
Yes,
What a blessing.
I am.
Chuck, you fine with the,
What a blessing. We don't
Decision
have to go
points?
to the Citizens to get.
You all right with
I don't have any problem with the decision point. We're gonna have another opportunity to
November?
well, the key decision is that we're not gonna sub-grant anything, because
That's right.
we're not gonna let Joe Blow grab the money and run, and then the citizens are responsible to pay it back.
right.
It's
And
just not worth that
I
risk.
don't wanna subgrant any of that.
Okay.
so.
Sounds like we're good.
This is a You can tell a ton of work has gone into this, Cherie and David. I mean, y'all have put a ton of energy in this.
Yeah.
And I know the whole board does, but I certainly appreciate what y'all have done. Because like Randy said, without a plan, we wouldn't get squat.
Yeah, nothing.
And I think we're well ahead of that curve and headed in the right direction. And certainly you have the dates to meet the requirements for the whole process to happen. So I appreciate that.
All of these can have grant funding, joint grant funding with them.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to try to
Do we
do.
have, do we have enough time, or do we have someone who has enough time to really go after the grants?
Yes.
We're already,
As they pay for themselves, that person more than pays for themselves.
we're already looking at potential grants that we can leverage with this. And the good thing is, with the state golf consortium, they have a consultant that's identifying those grants. So we're kind of able to get some of the benefits of what they're doing at the local
And
level.
if we do the same thing the next 5 years we did in the past 5 years, it meets everything that is in one of these projects.
Well, we
Just-
saved
All we gotta
$200 to
do,
Dewberry.
all we've gotta do is just do what we did the past
We're
5 years and
right
we're
there.
okay.
I want to make sure that we don't miss 250,000 because we don't hire a $50,000
Oh.
person.
There are some firms that do that, and one thing that that we kind of talked about just a little bit is that we may, once we get the multi-year plan done, is that we may want to go out and hire someone a professional grant writer, grant manager just for this. But that's something long-term, that if we got into a situation where we felt like we're getting behind, that we
Well,
could.
I really, here again, I don't want to lose a 250 grant because we just didn't hire a $60,000
We've got, like I said, all we gotta do is do what we did the past 5 years. And unless we get something that's outside of our wheelhouse, and everything that we presented to you is within our wheelhouse of what we've got, we're okay. But if we get something that's outside of our wheelhouse, we may need some help from the consultant as she's talking about. But we're gonna get some significant help from our folks out of the Gulf Consortium, the engineering company that's doing that, that's pulling all that together. They're gonna open up some doors for us as well. So, as well as they're part of our engineering CCNA program. So we'll be able to pull them in as we need to, if we need to.
Who is this group you're talking about?
What was,
That's,
what was the problem with the company that we hired to do our work?
Dewberry?
Yeah,
Well, it initially started out, it was Preble Ridge.
yeah.
And as the rules were written and everything, and they switched over to Dewberry, it ended up being a serious conflict
interest.
of interest between, you can't do the MIAP, the multi-year plan and all the plans for Restore Act, and participate on the engineering side of it. And they're our primary engineer. So if we had allowed them to move forward, we'd had couldn't have bid on any of our engineering work, which puts us back because they know where all the bodies are buried.
Dewberry bought Preble Ridge.
Right.
So now, it didn't start out that way.
But, so we still use Pebble
I'm
Ridge.
sorry, that's right, I said that wrong. I contracted with Dewberry, and then Dewberry bought Preble Ridge.
Right. Well, and I don't know that my idea about the weighting will do anything. I did a 10-time multiplier.
Yeah, I think
And
it-
it worked out the
yeah,
same.
your numbers were-
Bayside, you know. Seemed like it worked in my head, but it didn't work in the numbers, so,
Sometimes when you punch it in, it's like,
yeah.
well, it works. Okay.
All right, is that it for the
That's it.
presentation?
Yeah.
Ms. Peck, would you like to speak? You're the only citizen. Any staff want to speak and add to that?
Jessica? Kelsey? Huh? Sure? Sure?
Further discussion from the board?
Carl?
Greg?
Greg?
Just kidding.
Greg, just keep your eyes on all those dollars when they flow through.
I gotta go pick up plans. Amazing me.
All right, so we'll stand adjourned till 4 p.m., correct?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
That's a lot of work.